Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of Show Me How It's Done. I am so excited to show you guys how to make pearlized paper today. So I don't know if any of you have noticed, but in our new spring catalog, we have 12 by 12 sheets of this gorgeous white pearlized paper. Now, I got this idea from another demonstrator on Pinterest, but unfortunately her picture was not watermarked, but she had just a piece of colored cardstock that she had used this technique on using the all-purpose ink to create colored pearlized cardstock, which got my brain moving and led us to today. So what you need to do is, if you're following along, you're going to need our all-purpose ink. This is the Frost White color, and a blending brush, and then some cardstock of your choice. I chose to use the Seashells 3D folder as well as the Friends Are Like Seashells bundle, but you can do this technique with anything that you have. So these were the two samples that I had made, just in a beautiful kind of watery, springy color combination. But then my eyes kept landing on two other colors in my collection, which were the Misty Moonlight and So Saffron. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to play with those colors live on the video, and we're going to see how they compare to the ones that I've already done. Okay, so I'm just going to set these two aside and let's get going. Let me show you how we do this. So we're going to do two cards. I'm going to do two cards at the same time. You can just do one if you'd like. So you're going to need a card base in both of your colors. So I've cut this at 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I've scored down the middle at 5 1/2. So I have two of those bases. They're great. And then I wanted just the teeniest, tiniest border for my layers. So instead of going with my standard 4-inch across by 5 1/4, I actually went 4 1/8, and then I went 5 3/8. Okay, so that gives you just the slightest little border. If you don't want to worry about that finicky measurement, just go 4 by 5 1/4 and you'll be good to go. Okay, so we're going to put our card bases aside for a second. We don't actually need those at the moment. We're going to use these two front pieces. Now, I would suggest working on something that you can easily wipe off. So I've grabbed just an extra cutting plate from my Big Boss. You can also grab a plate maybe from your Stamparatus. And we're just going to do these one at a time, okay? So with my all-purpose ink here, I'm going to just dump some of this onto my palette. And then my blending brush, I'm just going to come in and just pick up a bunch of that color with my brush, okay? So it's all over here. Now kind of start off your paper a little bit and just go in a circular motion. You can see the paper is picking up that gorgeous shine. And it's very bold on the Misty Moonlight, which is another reason I wanted to showcase this with this color, because you can see the difference that I did just by adding all of that pearlized paint. Okay, so make sure you've kind of gone all over it like so, and then move that up, and we're going to do our So Saffron piece as well. This one you can see the color changing, just maybe not as drastically, but it does give it a beautiful shine. Got lots to pick up. There we go. And then just do the bottom part. There we go. So this paint will actually dry very, very quickly, so you can emboss almost immediately after you're done. By the time you kind of clean off your workspace and just get this out of your way, you'll be good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to move this. I would suggest you wash it. You know, you don't need to wash it right away. It won't dry on super quickly, but don't leave it for a whole day. It probably will create a little issue then for you later on. Okay, so I'm going to grab my embossing folder and my big boss machine. So if you're familiar with our 3D embossing folders, you're going to want to use your purple plate, or I think we have a gray one now, but it's the one that's really, really thick. It's not ever supposed to be used for cutting. It's only for our 3D embossing folders, which are nice and thick. So I am actually, if you noticed, I made mirror cards here, okay? So they're not exactly the same. This one I have my pearlized feature with the seashells popped up towards me. And this one I have my pearlized seashells kind of indented into the paper. And the other part of the card is the focal point. So that's what I'm going to do with this set as well. One of the sets, I'm going to have the pearlized. So if I open it up and my Stampin' Up is right there, I'm going to leave the pearlized facing up on this time. The next time I'm going to flip it over so that you can see both techniques. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which way you go, but I think I would like my blue one sticking up. It'll be a little bolder. Okay, so the 3D goes right on that base platform. Put this blue guy over top, and I'm sorry if this gets a little shaky for a sec. There you go. Roll it through. And that should leave you with a gorgeous piece to work with. Okay, now as I promised, we're not going to put the pearl side the same way. We're going to turn it over this time, and we're going to have the opposite showing through for this card. I kind of like to play with my embossing folders this way, just because when you see them, you always assume they should only be the one direction, but the opposite side is just as gorgeous. It's really important to remember that. Okay, I'm going to move that guy for now. And there's my negative of the embossing. Okay, so bringing back those card bases, we're going to start assembling our cards. So I just put these straight onto the cards. You can use any sort of adhesive that you'd like. If you have some glue, if you have the seal, I'm just going to use tape because it's handy and it's good to go. And I am going to just put this straight onto my card so that I can fully see that slight little border that I made around the cardstock. Okay? If you cut yours smaller, then you may decide to pop it up because you have the space to do it. All right, this one's just going to go straight on top. You can see it's a really, really subtle border around the edge there. There we go. And then I wanted some sort of sentiment on here. So I wanted to use the Friends Are Like Seashells stamp, but I wanted kind of a fun label for it to be attached to. So what I chose was this little label here, and this is actually from the Succulents bundle that is actually in our mini catalog as well. And then you guys know me, my favorite stitch circles. These I cut out of the pearlized paper. You can see the white shimmer there. This is the second smallest of the set. And then these guys I cut out in the coordinating colors that you see here. But what I wanted to do, and maybe you can see it in my sample, is add kind of some texture to my paper. One of my favorite ways to add color and to be able to do it on multiple colors is with our Versamark ink. So it simply darkens the color underneath it. You go from kind of a solid, stagnant color to something that is just slightly offset, but it doesn't take over any of the stamping that you've done already. So it's very subtle. You can hardly see it on my yellow already, but I've done that on there also. And we're ready to go. I stamped those, if you're wondering, in the soft suede ink, but I figured you didn't need to watch me stamp everything since I have another technique to show you. Okay, so this guy, make sure to only put your dimensionals in the middle section because that is where your circle is going to connect. You don't want them all over the place, otherwise you get this wonky tilted little tag. Okay, so 2, maybe 3 of them depending on where they're landing on your project. And then I put them just in the middle of my circle here. There we go. And then on the backs, you're also going to put dimensionals because you can never have too many. Just pop that out of the card a little bit more. And because these were mirror cards, I decided not to put my tags in the exact same place. So on the card that has the seashell, the large seashell, on this left-hand side, I put my tag just to the right, and the seashell is on the right-hand side here, so I'm putting my tag to the left. You, of course, can move yours around however you please, but I thought it was kind of fun to show that mirror consistency when we're doing our projects. Now these Opal rounds are some of my favorite embellishments lately. They are just so subtle with their just clear features and a slight bit of sparkle in there that I've found I'm just adding them to all sorts of projects because they don't take over, but they do add a little bit of character to what you're doing. Okay, so I've added those just as a little feature, and then you can see we've got a nice set of the mirrored up here and the mirrored down here. So great color combination, I think, all around. And then of course that soft suede would be a beautiful accent if you wanted to maybe add a 5th card to this series because it would tie them all together. So these are gorgeous. They're super easy to do. You saw how quickly I was able to get that set done. And I did 2 at the same time. Didn't have to clean any inks in between because I used the exact same ink on my sentiment, the exact same ink for my background feature, and the Pearlized all over. But I want to step it up a little bit and show you one more card, and it's going to use the same technique. So let's see what that is. All right, so I would like to show you how to do this card here. It's stepped up just a tiny bit, you can see, but we're going to use the same technique of creating a focal background with the pearlized image, and then we are using that pearlized paper to really bring the card to life. I've done my sentiments the exact same, just with a few different colors. Okay, so let's get started. I have chosen for my card base the color of soft suede, which is what I mentioned as a great tie-in option. We're going to end up decorating the background here. So you can either do the Versamark if you want a really subtle look, or if you want a bolder look, you could bring in your soft suede ink and add that to the back. But we're just going to do Versamark because I said the less cleaning in between your projects you have to do, the better. It's just going to be a little lighter of a brown. Okay, so we're going all around the background. This was a standard card base, the same as the ones I showed you in the previous card. So you're cutting a piece of 4 1/4 paper by 11, scoring in half at 5 1/2, and then folding in the middle. Okay, so I like this messy look around the edges. You don't have to do anything more because your cardstock is covering everything else. Okay, so you can put that away, and then we're also going to just move this to the side while we prep our other pieces. So my base, my shadow base here in the background, layer 1, I used the Seaside Spray cardstock, and I ended up cutting this at 3 3/4 by 5 inches. We're not doing anything to this one. We're just going to set it aside for now, and we will layer up the card in a few minutes. This is the piece that we're going to work on right now. So this is a piece of So Saffron, the same color that I used in the color combination earlier. I've cut it at 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. And we're going to, before we pearlize it, actually do a little coloring with some sponging on it. So you could grab another blending brush if you wanted and do the bottom section. However, I kind of wanted a messy look, and the blending is just absolutely gorgeous and uniform. So I wanted kind of a messy sunset / sandy look with this. So I just took my scrap of sponge and the Rococo Rose ink. And we're just going to do the bottom half of this card, okay? So nice, messy stamp and sponging, okay? So the bottom section is what you're going to want really dark, and then you bring a little bit of color up with your sponge as you go. So it'll take a few minutes for you to just lay down the right amount of color. And it almost turns a little brown on the bottom, which is perfect because you're doing seashells. So you get the sunset look with a little bit of a sandy beach option. And then if you're not getting the right amount on the bottom, just lift her up and lay down a ton of color in that bottom section. Okay, so very dark, like so. So this should be good. You only need a little bit of color, something to break up your palette a bit. And then we're going to do the exact same technique with our blending brush and the ink. So I need to grab my cutting board. There we go. And you might need to grab a little bit more of this ink. I like techniques like this because this has just been sitting in my cupboard. I use so little of it, but it's nice to have a technique that uses it. Okay, so once again, circular motion, and then start laying down that color. It will instantly change the background that you're working on. And it really brightens it up and also softens that Rococo Rose, which was maybe looking a little harsh. Okay. So gorgeous color palette. And then leave her for a second as you get your big boss set up, because we're going to run this one through an embossing folder as well. However, we're not using that seashell one. I'm bringing in this Seabed embossing folder. This is in our annual catalog, but it complements this card so perfectly. So you'll probably want to end up doing it if you love seashells. Okay, so grab your Seabed and just look at how all of the greenery and the grass is going. It tends to go up towards the top of your page as opposed to you putting your card in from the bottom like we usually do. So turn it sideways. Make sure you've got your sandy part at the bottom and your sunshine near the top of the images, okay? And then we'll roll this through. It's another 3D folder, so you can easily just use that same setup that we had before. And it will give you this beautiful background image, okay? So pretty to work with and really easy to do. Same technique, you've just added a little coloring to the process. Okay, let's layer this up. So I have taken this piece and just added some adhesive to the back, so it's one-dimensional. We're not doing dimension yet. Grab your tape. And add this. Okay, onto our background of blue, that seaside spray color. Now you may add dimensionals to the back of this piece because you do want it to start coming off of the card. And these will go onto that soft suede background that we decorated earlier. Like so. Okay, now for decoration. So we have a gorgeous little image here. However, you're probably a little confused when you look at both our embossing folder and the die that comes with it. It's a full image. It would take the whole card front. So you guys are going to gasp here. But what I did was I embossed a piece of pearlized cardstock. I took my die, because you can see it fits straight over top of those images, ran it through my Big Boss, which gave me this gorgeous piece, and then I cut it. I know, it's sacrilege. So I took my trimmer. This is about 4 inches wide, so I lined it up at the 2-inch mark, just against these grassy pieces, and I chopped it in half. So what I ended up with was 2 pieces, pretty much the exact same size, that I'm going to use to make a mirrored card once again. So this side is a beautiful focal point on the right-hand side. I've just put some dimensionals under it. This piece is going to be a beautiful focal point on the left-hand side of a card. So I'm going to turn it over and add a few dimensionals just in the big shell parts. You don't need to worry about the grassy features. If you have them in the shells, it will keep everything popped up for you just fine. Okay. Just add those. Might put one more just in this little shell. And then when you're putting this on your card, I didn't line it up to the yellow border, I lined it up to the blue border, okay? And then it will be taller than your blue, so make sure it's kind of fitting on your card before you gently press those pieces down with the dimensional. And then I love how these parts are loose. They look like they're popping out of the card even more. So here's my mirrored cards. So just like I've done with all my other sentiments, I cut out my little label from the succulents, stamped a sentiment in soft suede, and then I stamped the little sand images in the Versamark. Now I'm going to pop this up on dimensionals. However, you do not want dimensionals all over this because it's going to rest on seashells which are already popped up. So you only want dimensionals in this back section here. Okay, so this happy birthday, turn it over. You're only going to want dimensionals hiding in this section. If you're worried about it flopping around, you could easily just add a little bit of tape to this side so that it sticks to your shells, but you also don't need to worry about that because your dimensionals will mean that it's stable and sound as well. Okay, so I just put this opposite now, this way, and we're once again going to bring in those opal round jewels because they're gorgeous, and just add a little bit to the card with them. So happy birthday. And this one, instead of putting the 2 here, I put 1 all the way at the top because it kind of looks fun up there. It looks like a bubble just floating away. So these cards, if you lined them up, kind of, they would complete each other, but then you have 2 perfectly different cards. And they're just a gorgeous addition to this set that you already have created. If you were to add that to the mix, you've got just a wonderful array of colors that all complement each other. So I hope you had a lot of fun today learning how to pearlize some cardstock. I'm interested to see what you guys create with the technique, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to share it with your friends, and yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you next week. Bye!